the way they've responded. And it's been confirmed that another 125 Comet stores will close by the end of the year unless administrators find a last-minute buyer.
Plans to set a minimum price of 45 pence per unit of alcohol in England and Wales will be revealed later today. The government says raising prices will save taxpayers money by curbing binge drinking. Our health correspondent Thomas Moore reports now.
5 pounds, please.
For consumers, the booze bargains are a welcome way of saving cash. But the government wants to stop the discounts and set a minimum price for alcohol to reduce binge drinking. Michael Rowland describes himself as a social drinker. He doesn't see the sense in raising prices.
I don't think it would really make that much of a difference because there's always a cheaper alternative. I mean, a lot of people tend to go to France or other places where they can get alcohol on the cheap. I mean, if they're trying to do it to tackle children or young people, I think that there's always another alternative that they can move on to.
The government says studies show raising prices does work and will now consult on what to charge.
Liver disease incidence is going up in this country. We're one of the only countries in Europe where that's happening. And this measure could save about 700 lives a year. So that's about 2 people every single day. And I think this is a very good example of why we want to do much better at improving the survival rates from our major killer diseases. So there's a very good health reason. But there's also the question of disorder in our town centres. We think a measure like this would reduce the number of alcohol-related crimes by about 5,000 every year.
The Scottish Government has already agreed a minimum price of 50p, but is facing a legal challenge from the alcohol industry. The companies say the policy is unfair and warn there's no real-world evidence it will work.
Minimum unit pricing is not targeted at all. It will apply to everyone. The vast majority of us are responsible drinkers, but it will apply to us nonetheless. But to give you an example, if a minimum unit price of 50p were introduced, then 74% of the products on supermarket shelves would go up in price.
But drink is more affordable now than it's ever been, and health campaigners say it's time the price of alcohol reflected the damage it does. Thomas Moore, Sky News.
Well, joining us to discuss the plans are Dr Claire Gerarda, Chair of the Royal College of General Practitioners, and Chris Snowdon from the Adam Smith Institute. To you first, Claire. As somebody who represents GPs, they're the ones at the sharp end, aren't they, of a lot of alcohol abuse. How big a problem is it for GPs in terms of their workload and what kind of things are they seeing?
It's a significant workload right across the health service. Probably on any Saturday night, around 75% of anybody attending a A&E department will be there because of an alcohol-related issue. For me as a GP, it contributes to heart disease, lung disease, cancers, domestic violence. So it is a significant part of the NHS's workload.
Chris, surely then, isn't it right that we do all we can to discourage people from drinking, and if you make booze more expensive, it is going to put some people off?
No, absolutely. We should ban it entirely. It's the only obvious thing to do is get rid of this scourge completely. No, I mean, we need to be serious about it. I mean, we're dealing here with making a very popular product consumed by 86% of the population more expensive, in the hope that people who are chronic alcoholics or are violent thugs in the street are in some way going to be deterred by this. I think this is unrealistic and also very unfair. As the guy in your piece said, this is punishing the majority for the sins of the minority.
Can I just say, well, it's not actually going to target those alcoholics. It's not that group that it's aimed at. It's actually the groups that are drinking heavily at the moment that aren't dependent. There are other ways of dealing with those that are dependent, heavy street drinkers maybe. This isn't going to touch them, you're absolutely right. But there is no alternative. I mean, you said about banning it completely, and I know you said that as a joke, but there are only 2 ways of dealing with this. One is to reduce the availability, in other words, go back to restricting how you can buy it, and the other one is increasing price.
But let's be clear about it. I mean, there are some doctors who see alcohol as being like tobacco and they would like to see it banned, aren't there?
I think you'll find very few doctors that would say it's a viable alternative to ban alcohol. It's virtually, you can't ban it. We can't go back to prohibition. But what we have to be careful about is not, in the absence of evidence around price, it doesn't mean that there isn't evidence. We just haven't done the studies. But we know with tobacco that every time you raise the price of cigarettes, you reduce the number of people smoking, especially the young. And that's what we want to do.
But your point, Chris, is that we heard a whole ream of statistics there from the Health Secretary, and you don't believe those?
Well, it's speculation. This has never been tried in a country before. So, I mean, it's not particularly earth-shattering to say that if you increase the price of a product, then all other things being equal, the consumption is going to go down. This is in Chapter 1 of every economics textbook. But in Chapter 2, we have price elasticity, and this is what seems to be getting overlooked. The elasticity of alcohol for dependent drinkers, harmful drinkers, is much
we're not trying to tackle.
Perhaps we should be. Perhaps we should be trying to tackle people who have real problems.
But you can't tackle. You're absolutely right. Price elasticity at the top end, those are street drinkers, very heavy drinkers, because we know you'll commit crime to get your alcohol, you'll go and buy horrible alcohol. It's actually very cheap. We're actually trying to...
So therefore, increasing the price could actually make things worse?
Not necessarily. It won't make things any better. It won't.
If you're more inclined, you need more money, you could commit crime to do it.
Actually, they won't be buying the nice alcohol you see on those shelves. So let's they'll...
Yeah, but that'd be even worse for them, wouldn't it?
What we're trying to deal with is those young people who may go out and have 4 drinks of vodka, double vodka, before going out for the evening. The price that they're going to have to pay now, or if this comes in, may deter them. And what that actually means is 4 units less per evening, 3 or 4 evenings a week. That will do them good.
The young people who go out on a Friday or Saturday night think nothing of spending £50 or up to £100 with taxis and drink and everything else. If you think that increasing the price of the kind of lager they have while they're getting ready from 80p to 92p is going to make any difference,
we know with cigarette smoking, the more expensive you make the product...
This is true of all products. We're quite agree with you. But we also know that one of the major effects of increasing the price of cigarettes is smokers have a lot less money than they otherwise would do. We also know that after 50 years of incremental price rises, poor people are 3 times more likely to smoke than professional people. So we have an incredibly regressive tax. Cigarette taxes are bad enough in terms of being regressive. The minimum pricing idea is almost calibrated to be as regressive as possible.
It's the biggest public health. It's the biggest public health disaster we face.
Well, I've heard that about smoking and about obesity in the last few weeks as well.
Obesity isn't, and smoking the number of people smoking is going down significantly.
The number of people drinking is going down significantly, very significantly. We've seen the sharpest and most sustained fall in alcohol consumption in the last 8 years than we have seen since the war.
I won't trade stats. I just know.
Well, we need to look at the facts. It's meant to be evidence-based policy, isn't it?
Dr. Clare, what about looking at Norway, for example? They have got astronomical alcohol prices over there, and they've got a real problem with binge drinking. A recent survey showed that 6 out of every times Norwegians get drink, they get drunk. They drink to get out of their minds, and it's incredibly expensive. It's not putting off young people in Norway.
Well, and again, we'll have to look at what their alcohol-related, what we call morbidity illnesses over the long time. What's their rate of liver disease? What's their rate of head injuries due to accidents? We can all start trading this. I would like just to say, face validity. Look at it and look at what you see on a Friday and a Saturday night. Now, if you're saying that there is a reduction in the amount of alcohol that's consumed and it's not causing any harm, it's certainly not what I see in my consulting room, and it's certainly not what people see in accidents.
But you have to accept there has been a fall in the last 8 years of between 15 and 20% in alcohol consumption. Now, the model that is being used, the Sheffield University model, which is predicting these 100 lives that Jeremy mentions there and the thousands and thousands of crimes. This is all based on the alcohol consumption statistics from the year 2006, and they say that a 50p minimum price will reduce alcohol consumption by 7%, and all these dramatic improvements in various outcomes are going to then follow. Now, as it happens, we know what happens if you reduce alcohol consumption by 7% from the 2006 figures, because that's exactly what happened. In fact, we've seen probably a doubling of that. Has there been a dramatic reduction in crimes? Has there been a dramatic reduction in liver cirrhosis and drink driving and all the things that predicted in the model? No, there haven't been. So we really, if you're expecting anything exciting to come from minimum pricing, just bear in mind what's happened in the last 6 years. We've seen it.
Do you think, Dr. Rada, perhaps it's worth trying for a bit and then seeing if it does have the impact
we could try for a bit. It would be nice to have some evidence-based policy, particularly in this area, but what we'd actually have to do it's not a bit. You'd have to do something for a significant length of time to see the harm, because alcohol, you can see the immediate harm, so accident, emergency, but you want to be looking at the longer term harm. We don't know what it's doing to young people's brains and their livers to be drinking heavily from about the age of 15 to 16, which is what we're seeing. So as a doctor for many years, I would say to you, what else would you do? Telling people not to drink isn't going to work.
Well, I suppose one alternative would be to raise the drinking age. I mean, that might be a way of dealing with it.
It would, and then you have to, and absolutely, and I think, I mean, it's actually to enforce the current drinking age, and that's a very good place to start, is to actually stop the sales of alcohol to those that aren't allowed to be sold it. So, good place to start is that.
What about a model like they have in places like Canada, where you can only buy alcohol in a liquor store, and it is very, very regulated?
There are only two ways of dealing with this: reduce availability, exactly what you've said, or price. There is no other way of tackling it.
Well, we could just let grown adults make their own decisions in life, couldn't we?
Which is what we do at the moment. Sometimes, actually, we do that at the moment.
I know it's not the medical establishment's way, but we could try individual responsibility.
Grown adults, but then
14-year-olds who are drinking 2-litre bottles of cider aren't grown adults,
it's the usual problem, isn't it? We've got plenty of laws and we don't enforce them. How about we enforce the laws we've got? How about we deal with the chronic alcoholics who actually want help, and we leave everybody else alone, rather than trying to take more and more money off them at a time of terrible economic circumstances. Everybody's feeling the pinch. I cannot understand what David Cameron thinks he's doing. I cannot see where he thinks the votes are going to come from. He's got a government which is criticised for being a cabinet of millionaires. He's been introducing a policy which, it won't affect doctors on £100,000 a year. It won't affect David Cameron's cabinet, but it'll affect nearly everybody else. And it'll particularly affect the poor. I can't see how he thinks that taking more money off people, and not even going in taxes either, just taking money off people for the sake of it, is going to be a vote.
We're going to have to leave it there, and we'll get the government announcement on what they're actually going to do this afternoon. Thank you both.
Thank you very much.
Now, some rail season ticket holders are facing fare rises of almost 6% in January, the 10th consecutive rise above inflation. An annual ticket from Canterbury in Kent to London will be going up